Last time we talked about why human females have permanent breasts. Evolution. Fat reserves. Upright walking. A brain that got too greedy. It was a whole thing. But somebody in the comments, and honestly, fair point, asked the obvious follow-up question. Okay, but why do men have nipples? Welcome back to Ever Wondered. So, men have nipples. They do nothing. They produce nothing. They serve no feeding function, no signaling function, no survival function that scientists have ever been able to convincingly pin down. They are just there. And this is not a small evolutionary mystery. This is the kind of thing that should keep biologists up at night, because evolution is supposed to be ruthless about cutting features that cost energy and do nothing. The human appendix got downsized. The tailbone became a stub. Body hair got sparse. But nipples on males. Still here. Fully present. Completely unexplained by function. Or so it seems. Because here's the thing about this question. The answer isn't really about nipples at all. It's about time. Here's what most people don't realize. For the first several weeks of development in the womb, every human embryo follows the exact same blueprint. The same one. Male, female. Doesn't matter yet. At around 4 to 6 weeks after fertilization, nipples begin to form. The embryo doesn't have a sex yet, not in any biological sense that matters to this story. The Y chromosome exists, but the gene on it that triggers male development, a gene called SRY, hasn't fired yet. So the body just builds. It builds nipples because the default template includes nipples. It builds the basic architecture of a chest, a nervous system, a circulatory system, all of it shared, universal, running off the same initial schematic. Then, somewhere around week 6 to 8, SRY switches on in embryos that have a Y chromosome. Testosterone starts flooding the system, and the body begins diverging. The same tissue that would become ovaries in one embryo becomes tests in another. The same structures fork into different organs depending on the hormonal environment. But the nipples are already there. They form before the fork in the road, before the body had any idea which direction it was heading. And once a structure forms in embryonic development, removing it requires active biological machinery, a specific signal to dismantle it. That signal never comes. So the nipples stay. Not because evolution decided men needed nipples, but because evolution never got around to removing them. Which, if you've been following this channel, should sound very familiar. Evolution is not a designer. It's not sitting at a drafting table making intentional decisions. It's more like someone renovating a very old house. You don't tear out every wall and start fresh. You work with what's there. You add, you adjust, you occasionally leave something in the wall, because removing it seemed like more trouble than it was worth. Male nipples are, to put it plainly, load-bearing in the sense that they're structurally baked into the early blueprint, and ripping them out would require evolution to redesign the entire shared developmental sequence, which would cost more than just leaving them in. Now here's where it gets a little more interesting. Because they're just a leftover is satisfying, but it's not quite the full picture. There's a concept in evolutionary biology called a genetic correlation. The idea is that genes don't always work in isolation. Sometimes one gene, or one cluster of genes, affects multiple traits at once in both sexes. Nipples are a textbook example. The genes responsible for nipple development in females, where nipples are genuinely critical for infant feeding, are the same genes that produce nipples in males. You can't easily select for nipples in one sex while eliminating them in the other, because the underlying genetic machinery is shared. Even if a male without nipples had some tiny survival advantage, evolution can't just flip the switch for one sex without affecting the other. It's a package deal. Same genes, different outcomes. One body uses them extensively. The other just carries them along. Scientists call this a genetic constraint. And it's one of the main reasons evolution ends up with features that look pointless when you only look at half the population. Which raises the next question, because of course it does. If male nipples are truly functionless, are they ever functional? And here the answer is sometimes yes, actually. Male nipple sensitivity is real and neurologically present. The nerve endings are intact. The tissue structure is comparable. And in rare cases, rarer than in females, but documented, males can lactate. Not spontaneously. Not without a trigger. But the underlying machinery for milk production exists in male breast tissue. It's suppressed by hormonal environment, not by absence of the equipment. Cases of male lactation have been observed in men with certain hormone-secreting tumors, in some men taking specific medications that affect prolactin, the hormone that triggers milk production, and occasionally in male infants, who sometimes produce a small amount of milk in the days after birth due to exposure to maternal hormones in the womb. This is a real phenomenon. It has a name, galactorrhea. And it happens because the factory is still there. The assembly line was never dismantled. It just doesn't get the order to run. So male nipples aren't exactly vestigial in the strictest sense. They're not like the tailbone, a structure that once did something useful and is now purely a relic. They're more like a feature in standby mode, paused, not deleted. Which, honestly, is a more elegant evolutionary story than whoops, forgot to remove those. So let's come back to where we started. Last episode, we talked about why female humans have permanent breasts, a feature that requires ongoing energy, comes with real physical costs, and exists because of a very specific combination of evolutionary pressures, upright walking, front-facing social signaling, and a brain so metabolically demanding that visible fat reserves became a meaningful signal. Female breasts, in other words, are a solution to several problems at once. Male nipples are something different. They're not a solution to a problem. They're the shadow of a solution. The shared template that came before the problem was assigned to one sex and not the other. They exist because every human being starts from the same draft. Because biology runs on inheritance, not intention. Because evolution doesn't plan ahead, it just edits what it's already got. And sometimes, it doesn't edit at all. Here's the thought to take with you. Your body is not a finished product. It's an ongoing negotiation between what worked for your ancestors, what the genes happened to carry forward, and what was too expensive or too complicated to remove. The nipples on a male body are a record, a trace fossil of the moment in development before the blueprint split. A reminder that the differences we see on the outside are built on top of an enormous amount of sameness underneath. Both stories, last episode and this one, end up in the same place. We are all, at the start, working from the same schematic. What happens next is just timing. And hormones. And the fact that evolution is extremely reluctant to throw anything away. If that made your brain do something uncomfortable and interesting, welcome. That's what Ever Wondered is for. We'll see you next time.